Oh, oops, the stream started already. I didn't realize that. So, yeah, we're still working on the Context Bonsai stuff, and I'm still having trouble with this meta loop process. So we're trying to get an OpenCode plugin into a state where it's ready to be released. Part of that is I want an LLM set of instructions so that an LLM can follow a process that will let it fetch the latest upstream changes from OpenCode and then replay our specific commits that enable our Context Bonsai feature on top of the latest version of OpenCode. And so for people who haven't been following the series, we're developing an OpenCode plugin. There's a project for the plugin itself, and that plugin requires a few minor changes to the core of OpenCode. So we have a few commits on OpenCode that enable the plugin to work the way we want it to work. So we're going to want a process that just keeps that up to date so that we don't just have a stagnant old plugin that only works on an ancient version of OpenCode a year down the line or whenever it happens to be. So we need this process that the LLM can follow that will just routinely rebase a few commits on top of the latest OpenCode. I've set an agent on a loop to define this meta plan of what needs to happen. And the meta plan describes how to create a concrete rebase plan for a specific current commit of OpenCode. I've been instructing the agent to go through the plan, well, use the plan to create a concrete plan, and then execute the concrete plan using subagents. It orchestrates the plan using an orchestration system. And then at the end of that, figure out what things went wrong and feed those issues back into the meta plan so that those issues don't occur the next time we do it. And then it's supposed to start everything over again, reset all the Git working tree back to the original state, generate a new concrete plan and from the updated meta plan, and then follow the new concrete plan and so on. Just go in a continual loop until you can get through the entire process without any issues. And that keeps making several mistakes. One of them is that it will just stop after one loop, after one iteration. It does one set of instructions and then stops, which is kind of surprising because I have been using plans that have it go through iterations and repeat things over and over again without problems. Like that's a normal part of my working process and has been for at least a year at this point. But for some reason, this particular meta plan, it just doesn't understand. It does a one iteration and then stops and says it's done. I also found some reward hacking that it was doing. When executing the concrete plan, there were various issues that were coming up, and it decided a certain category of issues just doesn't count. It's not going to consider those as real issues. The only real issues are other buckets of issues that it figures out. So I explained that to it. And now I'm having it create this meta loop guidelines document because so far I've only been doing it in the agent. I described the loop, made sure the agent understands what the loop is about, what we're trying to do, and that it's supposed to be a loop that continually refines our meta plan. And then I had it go on the loop. And it's just not working out. So now I'm having it write an actual document. It's more like my normal process of working, except it's one layer removed because it's a meta loop. My normal process is I define a feature, I define a feature. That feature gets converted into an implementation plan, and the process of creating the implementation plan itself is a loop. It will go back and forth making refinements until some sub-agent validations think everything's completed and done. So it does that. And then it goes through an orchestration loop where it actually implements the plan that it created. And that's also a loop where it launches a developer, a reviewer, a judge, and it goes over and over until the entire plan is complete. That's my normal process of working. It starts with that planning document. So now I'm going to repeat the same process, but on this meta level where there's a meta plan document, and it's going to use this document to guide its steps through this iteration process. And I'm wondering if that will fix the issue of it prematurely stopping. And I'm also wondering if it will be able to overcome the reward hacking. So yeah, let's see. Whoops. Let's see. We have been iterating on this document a little bit. I haven't used my normal. I have an entire document that describes the iterative loop for creating a plan, and I haven't been using that. I've just been directly working with it to generate the plan, and I'm sort of the reviewer while it generates the plan rather than have it use subagents to review the meta plan, because I don't really have documents yet about how subagents should think about meta plans, and I'm not sure if my existing normal review process would actually work. So yeah, so I'm just being the reviewer part of this loop of iterating on the meta plan instructions. Okay, let's see. Okay. So the most recent thing is this meta plan includes instructions that says run one full loop iteration, and it describes the loop. And I'm worried that this phrase right here, run one full loop, is going to cause the exact problem that we've been seeing. It's going to run one loop and then say, done, I ran one loop. Because there's nothing that says to keep the loop going at all, which is very strange because I've been working in the session a lot, and it keeps making that mistake, and I keep correcting it, and it keeps saying, okay, I understand. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the full loop over and over again until we're done. So it says it understands, it outputs words that model the kind of behavior that I do want to see from it, and yet it produced these instructions that will clearly fail in the exact way that it's been failing. Okay, so I'm asking it how it thinks it should update the document to help guide a new LLM away from the behaviors that it's been exhibiting and towards behaviors that will help us accomplish the goals. The goals are already outlined in the document, and I think they were pretty good. Let me double check that. Goal. Here we go. Make the meta plan self-sufficient for plain agent with no extra context. Ensure deterministic execution from frozen inputs to final outcome. Require both technical and governance gates to pass. Eliminate recurring process defects by feeding all blockers back into the loop, and reach repeatable, smooth end-to-end runs on current upstream. Actually, I think I might need to add some clarification to the goals, unless let's just double check the overview and purpose and see if after reading those, the goals make more sense. Because as it is, just reading the goals by themselves is somewhat jargony. There's some assumption that whoever's reading this understands what's happening. So let's just start at the beginning with the overview. This process exists to iteratively improve the rebase planning system. So a plain agent can take the latest upstream, generate a concrete plan from the meta plan, orchestrate execution, and succeed without hidden assumptions or ad hoc rescue steps. That's mostly correct. There is one step that I think has to stay ad hoc, and that is installing dependencies, because as the upstream progresses, the dependencies get added, removed, and updated, and there's not really going to be a deterministic way to like fetch the latest upstream and get all of the dependencies up to date, because there will inevitably be weird dependency conflicts that have to be resolved using some smarts from the LLM. So that one might not be so, how did it describe it? It's going to have ad hoc rescue steps in that part of the process, which this agent already knows because we've already hit that, and I already said there should be a looser goal around that one step. And I think that's actually already baked into the meta plan itself. Okay, anyway, moving on. Purpose. Define the exact loop for iterating meta plan to concrete plan to orchestration to defect capture to meta plan improvement until the execution is smooth. That makes sense. Yep. Okay, and we already read the goals, but let's see if it makes more sense now. Make the meta plan self-sufficient for a plain agent. Yep, now that goal makes sense within that context. Ensure deterministic execution from frozen inputs to final outcome. I mean, we want deterministic execution of the concrete plan. I'm just gonna directly add that myself. Well, I don't know. So the thing is, the concrete plan has frozen inputs. The meta plan does not really have frozen inputs. Let me just copy this and I'll tackle that with the LLM a little bit. I want to have a chat and sort of get my thoughts in order about how we can talk about that particular piece. Require both technical and governance gates to pass. That's pretty jargony information related to how the planning process works. The plans that I create have these like gates, and when an agent is executing one of my implementation plan, it will have to make sure all of these gates pass, and the orchestrator will take the developer's work and pass it to a reviewer, and the reviewer evaluates, does the work pass through these gates? That's what this is talking about. And I think any agent that reads this will also have read the general, like the orchestrator framework documentation, and will understand what that means. Eliminate recurring process defects by feeding all blockers back into the loop. That's kind of, I'm not quite sure if it's going to understand that this process of getting the agent to finish without extra steps and the defect capture and this eliminate recurring process defects are all like related. That's kind of what we're doing. I don't know if a new agent reading this from scratch will sort of make all of those connections. So I might talk to it about that. And finally, reach repeatable, smooth end-to-end runs on the current upstream. Yes, that is correct. I might also test it out on some older upstreams, like a month old, 3 months old, 6 months old, and just make sure the process works on a few versions to make sure that we're not going to run into significant issues. Okay, follow the top level ownership. The assistant owns the loop end to end. Oh yeah, one of the problems that we ran into is on one of the iterations when I told it to follow the loop, to keep looping and keep doing the same stuff. It launched a sub-agent and it told the sub-agent follow the meta plan loop. Rather than it doing it itself, it launched a sub-agent to do it. And a problem with that is sub-agents can't launch their own sub-agents. And all of the instructions revolve around launching sub-agents to get the actual work done, and the sort of overall orchestrator agent sort of tracks the progress, understands the broader picture of what's trying to happen, and can sort of evaluate things. So that was an issue. So that's why it says the assistant owns the loop end to end. The assistant must not delegate loop ownership to sub-agents, and sub-agents are used only as required by the 2 operating documents that are listed there. And then it gets to this run one full loop iteration, and it describes the full loop there. And keep the loop state explicit. So it's talking about like tracking your progress through the loop, I guess. enforce the no fake finish rule. This is its idea of how to avoid reward hacking. Do not claim finish if any issue was observed in the latest cycle that violates the expected smooth execution. Finish condition is met only when the latest full cycle is, quote, pretty much flawless per user criteria. And then this respect pause resume control, I need it to strip that out, or you know what, I'll just delete it myself. That is just in the current session, because it messed up so much, I said, don't touch anything, stop everything. We need to talk about what the heck you're doing before you make any more changes. That was for it, not for whoever is following this plan. Okay, now let's go back here. What did I last tell it? How do you think this document? Oh yeah, it's going to explain what updates it thinks it makes. I want to make sure to talk about this phrase. Let me see. So this phrase that was in the doc that I said we need to talk about was ensure deterministic execution from frozen inputs to final outcome. So I'm explaining that the concrete plan has the frozen inputs. The meta plan does not. It's the whole point of having the two different kinds of plans. And there's also this is one example that the session I'm working on in this agent, when it's writing this document, is doing something that agents routinely do of when they're describing something to the user or putting something in a document or anything, they're assuming way more information than is safe to assume. It's more important when writing documents for subagents. The subagents don't know what the heck is going on. They're just fresh agents launched out of nowhere. They don't know anything that's been going on, but this document has so much baked into it that it makes sense to the agent that's writing it, but any other person reading that would be like completely lost. It's full of jargon. It's full of like assumed details that just there's no reason to expect anybody to know these things. So I'm trying to explain these things to it. I want to talk about how we might update that aspect of this document. Let's see. So remember that the agent using this doc does not have context about what's going on. This document must convey the full, what do I want to say? Must convey the full context needed to understand the content of the document itself. You know what a meta loop is. This the fresh LM agent or even human would have no idea what the heck that means. Think about this jargon issue for the entire document. Okay, now let's look at what it's described as updates it should make to avoid the repeated issues that we've been having. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I asked for. How do you think this document should be structured, understanding all the kinds of failures you've exhibited, and wanting the document to help guide a new LLM away from those behaviors and towards behaviors that will accomplish the outlined goals? All right. Great question. Given the failure patterns, I'd structure it like an operations playbook with hard gates, not a narrative. I don't think so. I think a narrative is necessary. I think a narrative is absolutely necessary. But let's just see what it says. Mission and success definition. Yes, that is needed. And we kind of have that partially, at least with the list of goals. One short mission statement, explicit definition of successful outcome, and explicit non-goals. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Operating constraints, must follow invariance. Authoritative sources list. Only these docs and rules are valid. No. The LLMs typically have a bunch of rules from all kinds of sources, and those rules are typically very valid for all of the work that it's doing. It has rules from the harness, it has rules from whatever the user configures in the auto-loaded stuff, like the claude.md file. There's lots of stuff, and it should consider all of those rules. So that's incorrect. Instruction precedence rules. Latest user instruction wins unless system developer constraints. No, there's not going to be user interaction. Okay, this is misunderstanding so much. So actually, I have to cut all of this out. Make sure that actually went to my clipboard. It did. Okay, so I've saved this, but we need to delete all of this so we can talk about its crazy idea of what it thinks it should do in this document. Oh, you know what? Oh, I forgot. Okay. Somehow it sent that instead. Oh my gosh. Some of the user interface aspects of OpenCode drive me nuts. I pressed Control Z out of habit for undo. That was dumb because I'm in a terminal context. But what happened is it put OpenCode in the background. Then when I brought it back to the foreground, that message was actually submitted, even though I was specifically not wanting to submit it. Well, it has read that, I guess. Okay. And I stopped it before it completed, but it says that's a crucial distinction. You're absolutely right. Deterministic behavior should be described as metaplan determinism equals deterministic procedure for producing a concrete plan, not frozen SHAs itself, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I want to talk about some of your ideas for the doc restructure that you mentioned, because you still seem to be really misunderstanding how LLMs work, how LLMs work within their harnesses, how users use LLM coding harnesses, the fact that this is not a user interactive process. We're wanting an automated process to keep our commits on the latest upstream. What else? We only even got through like the first couple of items and already have all of that to say. Okay, not a narrative is probably not the best way to approach this, although we do need non-narrative elements. This is an LM. A narrative is a very good way to help it understand its context and goals. Okay. that fixes that part. Authoritative sources list. Authoritative sources list. When I said you seem to not understand LMs, harnesses, and how users used them, this is the thing that triggered that. Users have auto-loaded documents that may have rules. The LLM harness itself has rules. These are always important. Okay. Instruction precedence rules. Instruction precedence rules. This is not going to be a user interactive process. So the user instruction wins thing is not applicable. That you even put this here makes me think you still don't even understand what we're doing. Okay. No assumption rule. If not specified, treat as unknown and resolve deterministically. Seems okay. This make no assumptions, but treat as unknown and resolve deterministically seem internally inconsistent. Okay. Context pruning correctness. Context pruning correctness requirement. This should not need to be mentioned at all. This is very much a U-specific issue. Almost no other LLM session exhibits the strange choices you've been making. Okay. The LLM harness already has the rules for this, and we don't need to restate them. All right. Failure taxonomy and countermeasures. Here we go. Failure pattern, a premature stop, a wrong delegation, blocker misclassification, evidence mismatch, stale freeze, detection signal, mandatory response, preventive control, and next iteration. Y turns mistakes into reusable defensive system. Your section 3, failure taxonomy and countermeasures, is so full of jargon that I can't even evaluate whether what you're saying is accurate or valuable. Okay. Loop state machine. Not one iteration pros. Yeah, this is the important part. Loop state machine is probably the most important part, followed by making sure the LLM will understand the overall context of what's happening. Okay. So init, meta update, meta validate, concrete gen, concrete validate, orchestrate, detect, defect capture, meta feedback, continue. I don't really like this plan because it has steps that are already embedded inside of the two operating documents, the planning guidance document and the orchestrator agent document. Those both tell it how to do some of the stuff in here. So I'm going to talk about that. However, there are issues here. The planning guidance.md and orchestrator agent .md documents are already finely tuned and work very well usually. You should not reiterate steps that are contained within those. Instead, you should simply say something like orchestrate according to .md, orchestrator agent.md, or create a concrete plan by following planning guidance.md. Boom. I will, okay, that's fine. Good enough. Next. Hard stop and continue rules. Continue by default rule. Allowed pause conditions, explicit user pause, safety irreversible block, missing mandatory input. Yeah, I guess that's fine except for the user pause, but I hope I don't have to restate that this is not a user interactive thing. Then required action on block, record the blocker artifact, and the next deterministic path. I don't know that it's going to be able to do a next deterministic path. I'm just not going to bring it up and see what happens when it actually updates the document. We'll see what happens there. The no fake finish criteria. It's like the, hey, don't be dumb kind of prompt that people sometimes give to LLMs, or you're very smart, be smart. And then the rest of the prompt. No fake finish. Okay. Determinism contract, freeze protocol. Freeze protocol. What are we talking about? The determinism contract. Okay. The freeze protocol, freeze the upstream ref, the upstream head SHA, the source head SHA, and the base SHA. This is part of the metadata plan, the meta plan. Wait. Yeah, this is part of the meta plan itself. It does not need to be in the meta loop process document. So we have two things. We have the meta plan, and we have a process document for creating the meta plan. Maybe that's fine. That is, I guess, how I would normally, if I think about this as here's a feature we're creating, and we need to create an implementation plan for the feature, we would put things in there like the feature has to do these things. Okay, I guess. Yeah, so these things should be in the meta plan. Let me just make sure it has these concepts separated in its head. Actually, next, the 6 item determinism contract. There is a meta plan. The meta plan is the output product of an LLM agent that will follow the, the meta plan. that will, okay, is the product of an LLM agent that will follow the, what's the name of this document? Meta loop process. Oh, I see. As defining the contract that the meta plan must continue to uphold. Okay. Okay. I think that was more help for me than something I need to tell the LLM, but it doesn't help to just have that there. Input normalization rules, canonical ordering rules. I think it's kind of making this stuff up. Artifact schemas and checksums. Command execution contract. Single shell versus isolated shell versus explicitly defined. I mean, okay, so the meta plan does have to have a section in it that tells the agent kind of how to execute commands, because the way it's working is it's using Git work trees, and Git work trees work by creating like a duplicate repository in a separate directory. But that means that from that point forward, if the agent is going to work on the separate directory, every single command has to be prefixed by a cd over to that directory and then do the command, or it has to have, special arguments that you can give, like dash dash directory is pointed to the other directory. That's what it's. I mean, the plan has stuff about that in there, and I'm not sure if this single shell versus isolated shell is about that. Let me just ask it. Prevents non-deterministic reruns and validation drift. I don't know about that. Okay, governance contract. Separate technical seal status from governance seal status. This is so freaking jargony. Define required approvals, exception ledger requirements, and final ready condition equals both pass. Why? It avoids technically ready but not actually approved confusion. Fine, that's already in there. Exception and substitution policy. What counts as substitution or deviation? Mandatory ledger fields, approval citation. Okay. This might be kind of part of the whole problem of why it keeps having issues with the plan. It does run into these exception situations, and it will record the exception and move forward. And then the evaluators are looking at the recorded exception and say, wait, you didn't record that exception correctly, and it gets stuck. That might be an issue with this plan. Evidence integrity rules. Okay, fine. Orchestration contract. Also, this evidence integrity rules might be another area where it keeps tripping itself up by making simple mistakes, even though it overall did things correctly. Orchestration contract. Top level agent owns the loop, cannot delegate ownership. Subagents are used only for specific phases and checks. Required reviewer judge cycle handling. Max iteration handling and exception behavior. Yeah, but that's all defined in the documents already. So on item 10, orchestration contract. Much of this is already defined in the correct docs. The issue we've had is the main agent, you, are launching your own sub-agents outside of the explicit instructions in the, well, it's not even, I don't mind if it launches sub-agents outside of the explicit instructions, but I do mind that it launches sub-agents to do the meta loop. It can't do that. There. Okay, I clarified the problem with launching subagents to do the meta loop, or launching a subagent and asking it to be the orchestrator, or launching a subagent and asking it to follow the planning guidance doc. All of these activities require launching subagents to complete that activity, and subagents can't launch subagents. I hope that it will understand that, because I've already kind of described that, and it has sort of twisted things around into this description that it has here. Okay, meta feedback protocol. After each orchestration cycle, capture every blocker, classify by location. Was it in the meta plan or the concrete plan, or some execution behavior that the agent did? I'm not sure about that. If there's an execution behavior issue, well, I mean, the LLM was following your plans, so if it did something wrong, your plan made it do something wrong, probably. Or your plan might be updated so that it doesn't behave in that way. I think I want to clarify that because, yes, LLMs themselves are not experts yet. They've not been trained on how to guide other LLMs. So you kind of have to bake this kind of information into your prompts, into the context, so that it can understand how to do this stuff. I'm really hoping that the model providers start using the activities that their subscribers are doing. So when you use like a Claude subscription or an OpenAI subscription, there are little things in there. I think some of them let you opt out, some of them might not, but there are things in there that say we might use what you're doing here for training our own models. And I really hope they do. I hope they I hope they are able to use sessions such as what I'm doing here of guiding an LLM agent of how to operate other LLM agents. I'm hoping that enters the training data, and that way the agents themselves can be experts on how to guide LLM agents. That would be great. Okay, anyway. Right, I was going to... Shoot, now I forgot what I was about to type next. Let's see. After each orchestration style, capture the blocker, classify by location. Oh, the behavior thing. Okay, on the classify by location, you have execution behavior. If you're talking about the agent's behavior, example, well, okay, so there we go. That's my way of telling it how to handle the LLM behavior location of a blocker or whatever happened. So this classified by location, there might be something wrong in the metadata, in the meta plan, or in the concrete plan, or in the behavior of the LLM doing this stuff. If the LLM behaved in an undesirable way, that means the concrete plan didn't have the right information in it to have the LLM behave the correct way. It either had information that caused the LLM to do something undesirable, or it didn't have the information needed to cause it to do something desirable. And then if the concrete plan needs to have a change made to it, well, the way for the concrete plan to have that change is to put it into the meta plan. So I'm hoping that giving it that description will help it understand that. Okay, mandatory decision, whether meta plan must change. Okay, sure. So after, in the feedback protocol, if stuff happens, do we need to change the meta plan or not? There's a decision that must happen there. That's fine. That should be in the process document. Required update checklist. I'm not sure what it wants there, but I'm not going to bother talking about that. It's not one of the main issues that might go wrong with this. Okay, minimal runbook checklist, operator quick path. A concise checklist an LLM can execute without interpretation. Freeze, validate metadata, generate concrete, validate concrete, orchestrate, capture defects. Okay. Yeah, this has got the same issue that we already covered. Next, item 12, the checklist. Again, the existing process documents already cover some of this. For instance, the validate concrete step is already part of planning guidance.md. Okay, I hope I just have to give it one example and it can rethink that whole thing. Make sure this entire checklist uses the planning guidance.md and orchestrator agent.md as resources that you do not have to restate. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Okay, I got to the end of its giant list of modifications it wants to make to the document, and I had so much feedback for it. Let's just see what happens. Here we go. I can't believe we're already like 50 minutes into this and we're still, usually in these sessions, we bounce back and forth. We give the LLM a little bit of guidance. It goes off to do stuff and we go to a side project and work on that while the LLM is busy doing stuff. Sometimes we dig in a little further. We have to think about a problem we want to solve and how we want to solve it, and we describe it to the LLM, and we get the LLM to a place where it understands and it's able to create a plan. That part of the process, that's where we are now. That part of the process usually has been taking anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes on a really heavy thing. This time it's taken 50 minutes to get this thing to a place where it can understand what it's supposed to do. This is a heavy interactive session here. Excellent feedback. You're right on all the key points, and I was mixing concerns. That should say separate. You're correcting me towards this model. Meta loop process should guide how to iteratively improve the meta plan. Yes. Planning guidance and orchestrator agent already define major mechanics and should be referenced, not duplicated. Absolutely. The process is automation oriented, not interactive. Yes. The doc should include enough narrative context for the LLM to orient itself, plus strict non-narrative controls. Yes. Okay, now, concrete plan freezes cycle inputs. Meta plan defines how concrete plans must do that. Meta loop process doc defines how we keep improving the meta plan quality. Good. Nice and clean separation of concerns. On your specific question for the contract, single, isolated, explicitly defined. Oh yeah, what does that mean? It means the generated concrete plan must clearly specify how validation commands are executed because that changes behavior. Example, if commands are listed as separate lines but rely on variables set in earlier lines, they only work in a single shell session. Okay, I have to re-correct it, something we've already talked about. There's no such thing as a single shell session. No such thing as a single shell session as far as an LLM operating within a coding harness is concerned. Every bash tool execution is a fresh new shell. So environment variables must be set within the same single command. Additionally, shell state changes such as CD must be within a single command, like CD other dir semicolon other command. Okay, there. It is possible to create single shell sessions that an LLM agent can use. For instance, you can tell the LLM agent to create a tmux session, and you can tell the LLM agent how to interact with tmux so that you have this persistent shell, but that's complicated. The LLM frequently gets confused. There's weird debounce mechanics when you interact with tmux, and you have to sort of bake this into the tools that it uses to operate with. So it's a bit of a pain. It's possible, but it's a pain, and I would really just rather avoid it until it doesn't exist. So I'm lying to it, kind of. I mean, it doesn't exist. You have to create it. You have to create it yourself. And I don't want to do that. Okay, if the harness executes each command independently, variables won't persist unless every command is self-contained. Right, yep, which I guess I just reiterated for it. So the contract must say one of run this validation block as one shell script session or each command is standalone. Okay, well, the run this validation block as one shell script session, this could be put into a script, and the script could be executed, but there is no stateful session that you have access to. Okay. Your point about classify by location is also right. If bad execution behavior occurs, the actional fix usually belongs in the plan context, not the agent as a location class. Yep. If you want, I can propose a revised minimal structure for the document. Nope, don't propose. Just go make changes and I'll review them. Okay. Don't propose changes. Go ahead and update the metaloop process.md, and I'll re-review that doc. Okie doke. It's probably going to think for a little bit before it does stuff. And I guess we can go to one of the side projects. Let's see what it pruned. So we are actively watching. Every time it uses Context Bonsai prune, we want to pay attention to how it's using the tool, because we are actively developing this tool and we're using it in order to make sure it has the effects that we want it to have. So it has pruned part of the context away, starting with when I asked it how many times have you stopped the meta loop prematurely, and then ending with done, I added both sections to meta loop process. Okay, that's fine. It can prune away that part of the conversation. So this was where it had produced this meta loop process document, and it had that weird line where it says, do a loop iteration one time. And I was kind of surprised that it put that, given we keep having the same failure over and over again, and that failure is that it does one thing and stops. So I asked it, how many times has this happened? Why did you put do it once? Rather than just tell it it's wrong, sometimes I try to lead it towards understanding and giving its own responses of why it was wrong, and get it to think, so that those show up in the context as things coming from the model rather than coming from me. I don't have solid, like I have not written robust experiments to show that this is better than me just stomping on it and telling it, no, you're wrong, this is right. But it seems to work better for me when I lead the LLM through its own thinking process to a conclusion rather than pushing information into it, when specifically in cases where it goes wrong like this, where it has bad behavior and has to be corrected. It seems to work better if you can get it to correct it, to sort of understand what went wrong and correct itself rather than pushing it from the user in. Okay, it's updating the plan and it finished. Okay, I guess we're not going to flip over to the side project at this point. We'll go ahead and review this. Okay, this process is for automated upkeep of Context Bonsai commits on top of latest upstream, already starting off stronger. The loop improves the metadata, the meta plan, until a plan agent can flow repeatedly with no hidden assumptions, no manual rescue, and stable results. That is a much better way of putting it than it has before. Okay. Purpose: define the control loop for updating the meta plan, generating a concrete plan from it, orchestrating execution, capturing failures, and feeding those failures back into the meta plan. Yes, that's good. Goals: a plain agent with only the meta plan can generate a concrete plan that works. Concrete plans reliably rebase required Context Bonsai changes onto latest upstream. Yes. Technical and governance outcomes are both explicit and complete. Oh, that's a way better way of stating it than its weird gate seal jargon. Repeated failures are removed by process updates not worked around. Yeah. Authoritative dependencies. Okay, good. Do not re-specify those documents here. This process doc defines loop control and quality gates around them. I mean, now it's conflating instructions for generating this document with the instructions that this document should be giving to the meta plan guy. That's another common kind of thing that I see is conflating sort of identities and purposes, I guess is how I would put it. I'm going to copy this part out, copy, and talk to it about that. Although I'd really just rather delete this line. Maybe I'll just delete it eventually. Okay, harness execution model. Each bash tool call runs in a fresh shell. No environment variable or shell state persists across separate bash calls. Any variable assignment, CD, or shell operation needed for a command must be in the same single line invocation or encoded in a script and run as one command. Beautiful. Loop ownership and delegation boundaries. Top level assistant owns the meta loop end to end. Do not delegate loop ownership to subagents. Subagents may be used for bounded work, for example, missing details checks, ambiguity checks, targeted research, reviewer judge phases. Subagents must not be instructed to run the meta loop itself. Act as the top-level orchestrator or the meta loop, or recursively satisfy requirements that require launching additional subagents on behalf of the top-level ownership. Fine, that's good. State machine, meta update, meta validate. Again, it's including steps that are already encoded in the documents it should be following. I have to address this. Okay, let's skip the state machine part because we're going to have to talk about that. Next is iteration protocol. Update the meta plan. Run required meta plan validation loop, and it references planning guidance. Okay, well, maybe that's fine then. It can have meta update and meta validate separate. Generate a new concrete plan from the current metadata plan. Validate that plan using planning guidance. Orchestrate the plan using orchestrator agent. Capture every blocker observed. Capture every blocker observed. Yes. My brain went to space for a moment and I read that sentence and didn't process it and had to think about it. Map the blocker to the plan contract, so that should have... okay. Map each blocker to the contract that should have prevented it. Update the meta plan so the next concrete plan includes deterministic prevention. I don't know that... Okay, sure. Prevention of whatever went wrong. Sure, that's fine, I guess. And then repeat. It's calling them blockers. I don't really want it only to consider hard blockers. I want it to consider any kind of hiccup along the way, like things that the LLM had to spin on and figure out itself. Like, ideally, there's one step that I've identified where I don't think we can have something completely deterministic, or not really deterministic, but simple, and that is the dependency updating, like getting my system to have all the correct dependencies and execute things correctly. Yeah, I'll have to talk to it about that, I think. Update the meta plan so the next concrete plan includes deterministic prevention, and then repeat. Okay, good. That is the loop, the iteration protocol. Okay. Maybe it also should have repeat unless the concrete plan was executed without any issues. That would be better. I'm just gonna repeat until the concrete plan was executed without any hiccups. I'll just say hiccups, whatever. It's not something precise that the LLM would do, but I'll just say that. Blocker handling rule. Any blocker that prevents smooth execution is in the scope. Okay, this is a little better. A blocker is something that prevents smooth execution. Okay. No exclusion class may be used to avoid updating the process when execution was blocked. Right. That's good. That avoids the example of reward hacking that we already saw, of counting something as, oh, it's just environment only. That doesn't count. Required loop records per cycle. Okay, so it's going to record this stuff in the plan doc as it goes, in the meta plan doc. An iteration number, a concrete plan path produced to this cycle, freeze values. I think the concrete plan path might be an issue because I think the meta plan has a specific, like it tells it specifically what to name the file and where the file goes. So how's it going to have different paths? I think that's always going to be the same. Oh, well, not always, because the file name is named after the commit ID of upstream. So when upstream moves, we'll get a new file, but if upstream is static and it goes through a couple of iterations, then it will be the same concrete plan. I guess it's fine to record it. Freeze values are recorded by that. Oh, freeze the values that are recorded by the concrete plan. Okay, sure, that's fine. Terminal outcome, whether the plan is ready or not ready or needs a replan. Okay. Technical seal status, governance seal status as separate fields. There's those things again. Replay. So it's going to record a field for the status of the replay branch. Not really sure what that means, but okay. Unresolved blockers and next action. Okay, yeah. And the done condition is do not declare done if the latest cycle had any blocker or ad hoc rescue, possibly with the exception of the one particular step. Done requires a latest full cycle that meets the expected smooth automated execution and passes required technical and governance outcomes. Okay, that's fine. So what I want to talk to it about, I put a bunch of stuff in my clipboard. The state machine I figured was okay. Concrete plan, I guess, is going to be okay. Oh, those were the only two things I copied? All right. In that case, let me think about this. The one of the steps of the meta plan is the fetching the latest, doing like bun install, getting all of the dependencies and making sure it can actually build it. There may be specific things like on this particular iteration, it had to install these particular dependencies and make a couple changes to get things working. Now, which specific dependencies and which specific versions should not be recorded, that's going to constantly change. But a kind of change that had to be made, well, that'll change every time too. Let me see. There is a part that's somewhat non-deterministic, and that's it. There is one more thing to talk about. Part of this plan, meta plan. I won't say this because it might think this is the process document we've been working on. Part of the meta plan includes fetching upstream and making sure all build dependencies are there. Well, just say making sure it can actually build, test the project before attempting the rebase work. During this process, there may be non-deterministic activity. The LM may have to adjust by installing different dependencies resolving dependency contracts, and potentially fixing our own code to work with those dependencies. Actually, that probably is part of the normal deterministic process. I can see that the specific behaviors needed may change. Beyond may change. How do we capture this as expected behavior and not count it as an ad hoc fix? And how do we make sure we don't get tripped up by the gates/seals? Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see. Great point. This is exactly where strict process and real-world automation hit a bridge. You want a controlled adaptation zone, not anything goes, not fail on first mismatch. Here's a clean way to model it. Add an explicit bootstrap adaptation phase. In concrete plans, before replay starts, fetch the upstream, hydrate dependencies, run baseline build test type checks, and allow bounded environment or dependency adjustments. This makes adaptation expected behavior, not ad hoc rescue. Define allowed classes, installed dependencies, lock file refresh, toolchain alignment required, package manager bootstrap scripts needed defined by the repo, and if action is in the allow list, it is planned adaptation. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Put strict bounds on adaptation, the max in adaptation attempts per gate, no source code edits outside of approved bootstrap paths, yep. No replay branch history rewrites during bootstrap, yep. And if bounds exceeded, then needs a replan, not silent continuation. Yeah. That's all good. Yes, I agree. How do we update the loop process and the current state of the meta plan to accommodate this? There we go. Oh, it's doing another prune. Okay, that's a fair one to prune out because it was sort of a side thing where I asked a question and it told me an answer. Here's the concrete update path. Update the loop process to add a bootstrap adaptation policy. Whoa. Yep. I'm not going to read these details. I trust it based on what we've already talked about. And 2, update the current meta plan. Add or adjust acceptance criteria so generated concrete plans must include a dedicated pre-replay bootstrap phase, an adaptation allow list, adaptation bounds, and status separation. Yep, that all looks good. Update the loop process doc as described. Then use planning guidance.md to update the meta plan as described. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm going to end the stream right around here. This is going to spin for a little bit because it has to launch sub-agents to do validation stuff. I do want to give an update on one of the side projects, because for anyone who ends up following the series of videos through, I kind of did promise to continue where we left off from last time, and we left off the image to maze project out on an interesting point. So let me give an update of what's happening here. Let's pull up one of our images. So this project takes an image and generates a maze out of it. Let me adjust the brightness of the image so that we can actually see the maze. Okay, so we have an image of a dog, and there's a maze on top of it. And we're producing a GUI because there's a whole lot of values that affect how the maze is generated. And the values are highly image specific. Is the image a dark subject on a light background? Is it a light subject on a dark background? Is there even a subject at all? Is it a landscape image? Like what? All of these things are highly dependent on the content of the image and kind of how humans are able to perceive like abstract representations of things. So right now, if you look at this maze, there is no way, if I turn off the underlay image and I just show this to somebody, there's no way you're going to say, that looks like a dog. So we need to be able to tune all of these parameters quickly, so we've created this GUI to do that. And I'll demonstrate some of that. This was already demonstrated the last time, but mask threshold is not what I want. Actually, first we need to invert it, because right now it has the most dense things on the dark areas of the image. These are the most dense parts of the map. And the least dense parts of the maze are on the lighter parts of the image, but we need the inverse, because all of the details are on the lighter parts and there's no details on the dark parts. So we're going to invert the density. Okay, now there's overall way very not enough density. We need more stuff in the maze in general to be able to resolve any detail. So we're going to bump up the grid size way up. There's a little more up higher than that. Okay, we'll start playing with this. And now we need to make the curliness of the maze more curly. So the minimum radius is going to go down. There we go. Now we can start see high detail areas separate from low detail areas. And actually this area here does reflect something that's in the image. We're starting to be able to semantically see bits. So that really dense area is the really bright area of the tongue. We're starting to be able to see some detail. Let's see, turn off the underlay. Okay, keep messing. Now I can mess with the mask floor, which is going to be how what's the lowest value that we actually render any parts of the maze. So I'm going to bring that up. There we go. It's already there. So now the darkest parts have no parts of the maze, and the brighter parts have some parts of the maze. Now at least it's the outline of a dog. Okay. Whoa, I did something here interesting. Now, one of the things that we most recently did previously was we had like 3 values for shadows, highlights, and midtones, and it would allow us to remap parts of the image, because, let me bring up the underlay image again, remove all of the contrast, or just reset the contrast and brightness to normal, because this image is overall very dark. The sort of middle ground of the average tone of our subject is dark. It's darker than 50%. So we want to take these dark tones that are sort of the average, like the majority part of our subject, and we want to map them to brighter values. We want these areas to be sort of a 50% value, not with this dark value that they currently are. So we have the ability to highlight here and see what the input values are. So I wish I should have gotten something so I can just stick a marker and have it stick there. But we've got an input value here on the x-axis and an output value on the y-axis. So I want to take this dark area and make it output a higher value. So I can take this and push it upwards. Whoa, something happened that I didn't. Oh, there's no undo. We'll have to put undo on this. Okay, take the. Oh, this is rough. The UI is not very pleasant to use. So that's another thing we'll have to adjust, but fine. So we're going to take the value that was here and push it upwards towards 50%. And I'll also grab these other ones too, up towards 50%, up towards 50%. There we go. There. Okay. So as of yesterday, we didn't have these multiple things. We had like, I don't remember how many were, 3 handles that we could grab. And it also wasn't using Bezier curves. We couldn't like twist the curve like this. It was just a solid point. Oh, this is really messed up. It also is now has only let me, it's only giving me the freedom to adjust the handles up and down on this. And I can't like pull the Bezier tangent in a different direction. Oh well. Anyway, so that's what we accomplished yesterday. We now have a much more precise way to adjust these instead of only shadow mid highlight, or even before I think we had 4 handles that we could move, and those handles stayed like stuck on a particular input value. So we could only take the 25% and move it up or down. Now we can shift these left or right and up or down, and we can adjust the curve rather than have it be like a node that moves 2 straight lines. That's the point where we are today. Let's turn off the underlay and see if the messing around fixed anything. It kind of did. It improved a little bit by bringing the sort of medium part of our subject up so that its actual value represents the 50% value. Then now we have separation between sort of the general areas and areas of the dog that were lighter colored. So yeah, I'm going to continue working on fine-tuning this UI. For one, I don't want it to immediately start out with 6 nodes. Even just having the endpoints plus 1 node in the middle is a great starting point. Oh yeah, the other thing we did, it wasn't just this finer control, but we can add and remove nodes at will. We can put however many nodes in there we want. So starting out with 1 node is perfect because we can add and remove nodes as we want. Right now it starts with 6 and it's way too, it's hard to use. There's just too many things here. So yeah, that's what I will continue on the next time we get back to the image to maze project. Now, I'm not sure I want to promise getting back to this on the very next episode. We will continue in general doing work on side projects while we focus our efforts on the main Context Bonsai project, gearing it up for release. Particularly right now, we're making sure that once it is released, it can continue to be updated in an automated way so that I don't have to continuously rebase stuff. After we get the rebase loop working out well, we're going to write, we're going to simplify it. So we're going to rebase it on the latest mainline. We're going to simplify it to get rid of all of the document updates. So as part of generating this, we make plans and then we execute those plans. All those plans have been committed into the repository, but we want a fully clean OpenCode repository that if we wanted to, we could submit a pull request to the OpenCode project. They won't want a thing that's littered with a million markdown plans. That's just slop. That's not useful. So we'll minimize things. We'll consolidate things into as few commits as possible. So as we've been making changes, there's probably a few commits added on to the end that belong just incorporated into earlier commits that we made. So we'll do that process to simplify things as much as possible. Then we will write some documentation about how to use the plugin, and sort of what it does, how to use it, why it's beneficial. And we'll make a YouTube video about it and have sort of like an official release that invites people along to use this. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next week.